This is Matt Murray with Murray at the NFL. Today I'm going to talk with you guys a little bit about the injury to Tua Tagovailoa. The injury he sustained was a hip dislocation, but also a posterior wall fracture. So the way that works, the femur sits inside of the acetabellum of the hip, and when he came down with his right knee and right hip flexed, he landed, causing enough force to fracture the acetabellum through the posterior hip wall. This has been seen multiple times in rugby. It's kind of new for football. The only people that they really have associated with similar injuries are people like Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson's was quite a bit different, though. Bo Jackson is believed to have maybe had a subluxation, so he did not have a full dislocation of the hip, they believe. So one of the concerns that people are talking about is AVN, or avascular necrosis. That could be a concern in the future for Tua. But one thing that is working in his favor is they reset his hip in under 6 hours, which usually gives a much higher chance of that not being an issue. One of the other concerns that we see is injuries to the sciatic nerve. That's something that we will have to see throughout his recovery process. And then arthritis as well, building up in that hip joint. So as we go forward, those are things we're going to have to look for. And it's going to be a long recovery process. We're looking at 6 to 8 weeks just until he can be partially weight bearing, all the way up to 3 months probably until he can be fully weight bearing. From 8 to 12 weeks, he'll probably be working in a pool, trying to get some mobility, but at lower rates of gravity. So after that, we're looking possibly 8 to 12 months for a return. I would expect that he doesn't play professionally or in college next season. He will not be able to have any impact on his hip until 6 to 8 months. So he's not going to be doing anything hard for 6 to 8 months. As far as anything that's going to be pounding force on that hip joint, as well as pivoting, which is going to be very pivotal to his success as a quarterback. You must be able to pivot to drive the ball. Also, he's going to have to be able to avoid pressures, so that's a huge pivoting motion. Looking forward at what we're looking at, the cost of a first-round draft pick, I think, is just way too much for Tua at this point. You're looking at maybe beginning of the third-round pick, looking at $787,000 as a cap hit. If I was to looking at the pros and cons of staying in college or going to the NFL, looks like if he was to go into the draft, there's a few different reasons he might do that. The first is if he thinks that there's a potential that this injury could go downhill quickly. Although you have insurance for issues like this, that would be one route to pursue. Not saying that he would do that, but that is one way that he could pursue the whole thing just in case. You've seen this with a lot of other athletes due to concussions or other injuries that never got to play in the NFL, but still were draft eligible and did get drafted by teams in the odd case that somehow they were able to play. Looking at other things, you don't want to go back to Alabama and then have a third major injury. So he may be looking at going into the NFL just to avoid injury for the third time in a row. Reasons that he would return to Alabama. I think these are pretty obvious. He's going to return to Alabama, and even if he doesn't start next year, he gets to show everybody after rehab what he's going to look like going into the draft process for 2021. If he can show that he has rehabbed and is doing well, that could help his draft stock. If he recovers really well and could play in 2020, that would significantly help his draft stock, as long as he looks like the Tua that we've seen to this point. That's the most important part, is that he has to show us that he still has the ability, and this isn't going to be a debilitating issue. Okay. As for teams, I think that you have to err on the side of, this is a very rare injury. It does not happen very often in major sports. It usually occurs only in like car accidents or something with very, very high forces. So I would have to say, if I'm a team looking at this, maybe it's worth a third or fourth round pick. But outside of that, I would not be using a first or second round pick. That's a lot of money to wrap into a player that you may not ever get to see on the field. Those are my thoughts. Thank you, everybody, and make sure to follow the channel. Hey guys, if you would like to see more of my content, follow me on Twitter, Murray at NFL. Also, you can follow or subscribe here on YouTube. I will post a link underneath to my blog as well as to Twitter. If you guys have anything that you would like to hear more on, make sure you can either send it to me on Twitter or you can send it to me here on the comments on YouTube. If you want to see more content, definitely check out the blog. It has Cardinals and NFL content. I will dive into the draft quite a bit once we get closer, as well as free agency. So go out there and have a great week, guys.